We are back with another episode of Crafty Saucer. Now, today we are joined by a Collingwood fan, and I already gave him a little shit before this. I don't support them, but I also don't hold it against anyone that does support them. And my guest and I, we can still be friends. He is the talent lead at Mantle Group and has given a lot of his time and expertise to companies like REA and Slalom whilst building out talent teams there. Today, what we're going to talk about is investing in high tech solutions in hopes that they will yield better results. But what if we were to explore cost effective strategies that are equally innovative, that ensure our talent function is scalable, sustainable, and financially viable? Now, with his background in design and engineering, this person always looks at a more creative approach to hiring, and I bet he is much more well positioned to share some of his experience on this topic. So let's get into it and let's get crafty. Simon Hedt, thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Finally, we get to talk about the topic that you and I have been discussing for the past few months. Now, before we get into our conversation and our discussion, quick intro for our listeners. Who is Simon and what makes you tick in TA?
Who is Simon? Geez, how much time have we got? Look,
As much as time as you like, my friend.
I am a passionate talent acquisition professional, mainly because I feel very strongly that if we're going to be spending a third of our lives in a workplace with colleagues and doing a job, like why the hell are we not focusing on living and working with great people in great workplaces and doing things that mean something, and not just resign to the fact that old school organizations do things a certain way and have crap cultures. I'm really passionate about that, right? Like I think we should really push the needle and shift the way that we treat work across Australia. So that's what makes me tick and what makes me excited about doing what I do. We're the gatekeepers of organizations. We build teams, we build businesses with people, and I think that's a really worthwhile vocation and one that I'm super passionate about.
Excellent. Now, I also know that you are a Magpie fan and you love coffee. Is there anything else that you enjoy doing besides these two?
Yeah, look, pardon me, I love cycling. I love riding my bike, whether it's just riding to work or going out for a ride on the weekend. It's my sort of meditative space away from family and work and sort of my me time. I love music, and honestly, like all types of music, whether I'm listening to music on the train or listening to records at home or, jamming out with my son, in the car and doing some, carpool karaoke on the way to school. Like, that's sort of the other thing I love doing.
Like, don't tell me you're another Swiftie fan, are you?
I will be honest. I know a few of her songs, but I'm not like deep into what she does. But I do have a certain amount of respect for what she's been able to achieve and create in her career. It's very impressive.
She's an amazing performer, no doubt about that. Now, Simon, we really don't talk enough about building our talent when we don't have a big fancy budget, right? Building a TA strategy on a budget can be quite the challenge. But as you know, it's definitely doable. You've done it before, and exactly this is what we're going to be talking about. It's doable with the right approach. When you're starting out with limited resources, it's absolutely crucial to focus on the essentials, making those strategic decisions, getting the key players on the same page. Let's talk about your experience. You've built a function on a budget. Can you talk us through what were those initial steps? What were some of those key considerations for setting up a talent function when you didn't want to break the bank, so to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think specifically, when I joined REA, they were shifting to a sourcing model, sourcing business partnership, and that's what we were looking to build out. So, although REA Group is a large business with a big budget in lots of different areas, it wasn't like, hey, you've got X amount of money to spend on doing, whatever the hell you want. So it really started with like an assessment of what is currently available in the business. Now, look, we were quite fortunate to be in a technology business, and I've been in technology businesses since then. So technology teams, product development teams, software teams, cloud teams, they already use certain types of tools that, if you look at it practically speaking, you can adapt, into a talent use as well. So that was sort of what we started looking at, but also thinking about visibility. of this, the kind of the I suppose the mission that we were on, to increase the volume of software engineers coming into the pipeline and filling a high volume of roles. Who needed visibility, who needed to make decisions, who needed to be, across what we were doing. And the two things kind of collided on that. So what have we already got available in terms of tools and options, and who do we need to include along this journey to make sure that they're a part of what we're doing, and create as much as possible a single point of truth where everyone can kind of come and connect and they know what's going on. Because in a large business, or most businesses, right, that's probably one of the key pieces of talent, giving people visibility as to what's going on. So there were two things that we looked at, and they both revolved around agile ways of working. If you think of a Kanban board, a lot of product development teams use variations of this, and we effectively created a workflow in Trello, which the business already used, but there are loads of other free versions of similar tools out there that replicated the interview process, right? Basically from end to end, all the way through to like rejection reasons, and created a series of tags that allocated talent to different parts of the business, different skill sets. You could then invite all of your hiring managers and other sort of key stakeholders onto that board, tag them, give them information, updates, interview notes, and then move them along the process. And very, very quickly, you've got a snapshot of your entire talent pipeline for every technology role that you're currently recruiting for. The whole TA team can see it and can add to it and can edit it. All your hiring managers can jump on and straight away, and they can filter based on their team or line of business. Boom, here we go. And that was probably one of the first things that we're able to do quite quickly. We replicated that in a physical form, actually. We found a big spare window, got a bunch of cards, and then drew up all the roles that we'd been given as a technology team. And there were something like 75, 80 odd live roles. Invited all the key engineering managers to a weekly meeting with those roles. We had a line. It's like, right, see all these cards above the line? That's what we actually have capacity to work on live right now. Everything below the line is in the backlog. You guys tell us if you want this role out of the backlog into the live role list. You guys decide what comes out. And it was really pushing back to the business. That wasn't solely on me. That was a joint effort between myself, a colleague Adam, and the head of talent at the time, Jason, and then following him a guy named Josh. But there was a lot of trust put in us that we weren't the experts in technology. We were the experts in recruitment. So that was what we knew, and this is how best to approach it. And that was two simple things, right? Utilizing existing Trello license, utilizing a window, and writing up some cards with a texter and some blue tack, right? So maybe $12.95, right, to get that up and running. And then it's more about the relationships, the meetings, the cadences, and actually leveraging the people in the business to make those key decisions. Where it's not for us to decide what the priority is. It's for the business to tell us, this is most important. Great, awesome. I'm going to focus my energy here.
Yeah. I love the simplicity and the story behind that, because what you're sharing is actually so simple, because you'll have to use what was already at your disposal without having to go out and start demoing all these tools and spending heaps of money for something that you didn't know was going to work or not. And what y'all did by that was y'all also built partnerships and trust by having that transparency in front of the business, right? But by having that transparency, it also put the accountability on the right stakeholders, not just on recruitment, but also the right stakeholders to say, because let's face it, I had something very similar in a small sort of consultancy that I was working in. And I had done exactly the same thing, Kanban board on a large window. And day in, day out, the account managers didn't have the time to go into the systems, which was the ATS, and be like, oh, I need to go and see where my rec is now. But as soon as they walked in, they got a live view of where things were. And we could have a one-on-one conversation without them going and clicking 10 different buttons to see one thing. But what that also fostered was a trust factor that we all knew our shit. We knew how to get stuff done, but we also put that accountability back on one another to be like, this is where the blockage is, and this is what you need to do to remove that blockage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think some people in our space are sometimes a bit scared to kind of, open up and show the transparency of what's going on, or perhaps they're a bit
Mm,
protective of it for various
mm,
reasons. I'm sure they're all valid. But as you say, with that transparency comes collaboration, right?
mm-hmm,
It means that we can both take ownership for the parts that we're responsible for. Hey, this is everything I can take control of, and I'm pushing hard and I'm doing everything I can. This is what I need you to take control of,
mm,
because together, that's how we're going to get the right result. And you only get that from that kind of visibility and transparency. I
mm.
think, in
Mm.
my experience.
And what you say is right. Collaboration is obviously always going to be key, especially if you're using internal systems that may or may not talk to each other, but you have to get them to talk to each other, which means you
Yeah.
have to talk to people to make sure that the systems talk to one another. Now, that would have involved some really creative and smart thinking to find those cost effective solutions. Now, as we know, Trello is actually very, very simple to use, but it's very powerful and effective. Are there any other tools or technologies that work particularly well when you were setting up that sourcing sort of function or that unit, but obviously having those budget constraints still happening in between?
Yeah, I think another one that I've seen utilized in a similar fashion over the years is Slack. I know
Mm,
you can get free versions of Slack with with limited capability, but enough
mm,
for a small business, right? And a small team. And the way that works, it's really about again creating teams of the right people and the right stakeholders, and sharing specific information with a specific call to action within that. So it's a bit of a different approach to it than a Trello board. It's more, as you would most people would know who've used Slack, more of a thread. But if you're, focusing in a particular area and you're wanting to quickly get people across, hey, here's this profile, these are the key points, yes or no. Hey, here's this profile, yes or no.
mm,
All right, cool. Who's going to jump into the thread off that profile? Okay, who's up for interviewing? Or you then create, little groups around your interviewing cohort. Right, we've got 10 people, all of you who can do technical interviews for software engineers. Cool. Who's available over the next 3 days? I need 1 hour. Hands up, let's go.
yeah.
And creating some, again, some more visibility, more collaboration, and more connection that way. So that's probably another one. Look, it's probably not a massive surprise to a lot of people. These tools are popular for a reason. And I think they're really great at giving away a certain amount of value for free or for very little, for businesses or teams that don't, as you say, don't have a massive budget, don't have a lot to work with. And then if they're really valuable, you've already got the ROI.
Mm,
If they're really useful, then you measure that, you capture that, and then you can go back to the business and go, hey, look at all this that we've been able to achieve with a free version.
yeah.
Here's all the extra stuff we would get if we paid for a license, and the ongoing impact it would have to the business.
Mm,
Now, you might not always get that across the line, but at least it gives you some data to take to, whoever the powers that be are, and have that conversation.
mm.
And, you might get lucky.
Well, it seems like it worked for y'all in RE, and that was at a time when y'all were scaling. RE is obviously a lot more bigger than when you started. But at the same time, again, it goes back to we sometimes make things more complex for ourselves than it needs to be. Like, going in for a shiny new ATS or CRM because, it's the talk of the town, or a shiny new sourcing tool because everybody's using it or they say it's good. But if we really sometimes just want to keep things simple, you have to go back to the drawing board and look at other tools, right? But it sounds like you'll had a really solid strategy in place to make the most of y'all's budget. With all of those tools, technologies in play, how did you go about sort of tracking and measuring the effectiveness, sorry, again, without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I think this is where you got to get it. You can't be afraid to get your hands dirty a little bit, and it is
Yeah.
manual, right? Like if you haven't got a budget, that's cool. You got to carve some time out to do some manual tracking, but it's well worth the effort, when you do, because that then creates, the value in taking it back to your leadership team and showing them this is what the investment will create. So look at the Trello board. Anyone who's used Trello in the past, tracking and reporting is limited on that. So a lot of it came down to, manual counts, filtering in different areas, counting up the various aspects, and then filling out a beautiful table that my colleague Adam put together, and then reporting on that on a regular basis to our engineering managers. But those simple numbers, and it wasn't like, crazy amounts of data. It was really just tracking, the volume of candidates, in across gender and across the various teams and the various engineering disciplines. But we were able to quite quickly see that from before we had the sourcing function, at most we had 25, 30 people in the pipeline at any given time. After implementing the sourcing function, it was closer to 100.
Wow.
Right? And headcount in the team was only one or two more people than what it was before, right? So it was by focusing on separating those two pieces apart rather than having kind of two, full 360 recruiters internally, separating those two roles into full business partner, full sourcing partner, sourcing manager.
Mm.
And then those people collaborating and working together really closely with this tool. It was great. I was in the sourcing role and I could just come in every day and just know, right, we need, 40 people, but it's only really 3 profiles that we're looking for at various seniority levels, and just go hard. Applications, LinkedIn, referrals, meetup groups, right? And just bring in as many great people as we could, speak to as many people I could each day, bring in that, into that front of the pipeline, and then constantly, checking in with my counterpart, who was Adam, who was the business partner, on, hey, this person could be good for this role. And we're constantly kind of doing this connect the dots. And then he would go away and make sure that the right teams were, being a part of those interview processes. And it was great. Like it worked really well for a really long time.
And I think also to what you were just saying, having, knowing what your verticals are, what you're hiring for, like in Trello, like just tagging, knowing what your verticals are and your tagging system. And I think, what you can use a simple, decent system and actually make it your own into something very compelling for the business case as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I probably jumped into the the solution piece around Trello probably a bit too quickly, but it did start with a lot of that, right? A lot of just whiteboarding, just figuring out and going through stakeholders, tags, who needs access and why, what are we trying to achieve, what's the value in this, and that's where kind of Trello presented itself as the best option. We kind of already had roughly in mind what we were looking to create. But there was quite a few conversations in the beginning around just getting in a room with a whiteboard with a pen and just going, right, let's do this and then that, and then these are our groups, and then just adding to it. So it was also progress over perfection, right? We didn't have it perfect when we first set it up, and we kept adding to it and building to it and creating new tags that needed to be there as we went along, right? So other stuff came in, around visas and locations. Other tags came in around putting people on hold, or
Blacklisting
feedback
them.
tags. yeah, absolutely, right. Like it happens sometimes. So I think it's also about knowing that whatever you create, just build something and start something, right? And you can add to it, you can refine it over time. It doesn't have to be perfect from the get-go. It will become perfect over time as you use it.
It's an iterative process as you go. So with obviously it's been a few years since you left REA and when you started that journey initially. How do you see those same mechanisms still being valid in 2024? So let's say there are companies that start up, scale up, who don't have the budget to buy the fancy new sourcing tools out there. So do you see something like Trello board still working for them, or something similar?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think the fundamental reasons behind why we built and created the system we did at REA haven't changed. You've still got, no matter what the size of the business, a group of a variety of stakeholders, all who want to know and understand what's happening with recruitment and their roles. Whether it's for the right reasons or wrong reasons, that's kind of an aside, right? They all want visibility. They want to understand what's going on. And a lot of them, the great ones, want to know how they can help, right? So that transparency and that connection piece, connecting them into the process, that's still super important. Irrespective of what your ATS is, irrespective of what system you're using or how you're headhunting talent or how you're kind of, going through job applications, none of them are great at giving you a single point of view of all your candidates in the pipeline for every single role for the entire business. None of them are good at that.
True.
Right? That's just a fact. So if that's something, and I still think there's a need for that in what we do, Therefore, something like or similar to a Trello board, whether it's a physical board on the wall or a digital version, whether it's Trello or something else, there are lots of different options out there. I still see the primary drivers and reasons for having something like that haven't gone away. The other piece is around collaboration and relationships. That's still crucial in being successful in recruitment,
Yep.
right? You need to have those key groups of people, form strong, trusted, and authentic relationships with those groups and involve them in the process so you can get the best out of them, right? If you keep people at arm's length, and they don't know what's going on, you can't just then expect them to turn around and give you everything that you ask for. Like it goes both ways, right? So you need to form those relationships, and strong communication is at the core of that. Both
Exactly.
in person, through something like Slack or Google or whatever system you want to use, and then having a single point of truth, right? Which is the Trello board. So I still believe quite strongly that there's like a lot of validity for having that. What it looks like, what tool you use, I'm sure will continue to evolve and change, and there's probably going to be ongoing and evolving needs in this space. But those core principles, they remain the same today.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Simon. And I have one more question for you, and I think this is a bit of a self-reflection one for you. So, reflecting back on your journey, what's one piece of wisdom or advice you wish you had known about building a talent function on a budget when you had started out?
That's a good question. I think although quality is always front of mind, right? And you want to make sure you bring the right people into your business with the right values alignment, the right cultural fit, and the right technical skills. And I would never say anything to the alternative. It's still a numbers game. Don't take your sight off the fact that it's a volume piece, and whether you need more people or you need more time, like it's a funnel, it's a marketing funnel, it's a sales funnel. You got to get out there. The more people you speak to, the more likely you are to come across great candidates, and the more likely that they are to then move through the funnel and create and get great roles and great careers at the end of it. Whether you're agency or internal, it doesn't matter, right? I think for a while when I went internal, I lost sight of that a little bit, and I was being really kind of narrow and prescriptive and really only wanting to bring in best. I'm not saying lower your bar. I'm not saying just we're at the top end of the funnel, right? And we've got to keep that in mind. Like we're not at the bottom. We're not making the final choice. We're not saying yes or no to whether we hire someone. It's keep it open, right? For the right reasons, so that you can keep the flow of candidates coming through, because you can't make snap judgments, right? I think too many of us too often make snap judgments around people, whether it's based on their profile, based on unconscious bias. Like, just keep that in mind. It is a balance. You don't want it too wide. You don't want it too narrow. But you just got to find that perfect flow, right? Where you're still getting a good volume of people through the process, but still retaining that high quality. And it's a hard thing to do. Like it's tricky, but that's always the piece that I think we need to keep assessing, keep looking back at what we're doing, go, am I being too narrow? Am I being too wide? Like, how can I adjust?
Yeah. I love what you said about the numbers game, because you're right. There has to be that key balance. And it comes back to how sometimes we within recruitment can be very short sighted, where we forget that those numbers can actually turn into candidates at some stage. And that actually ties into your candidate pipeline management, your talent pooling. Where else can we reverse engineer these candidates back into the business?
Hmm.
And this is where we lose sight of that long-term game, right? And we just look at, okay, we've got a role now, we've got 30 candidates we've spoken to, but we only have to make that one hire. And this is where we kind of lose sight of the other things sort of surrounding it. So
Yeah, I think at the same time, just remaining connected to the fact that all those numbers and they are important, but also remembering they're all humans. They're all on career journeys. And like when I worked agency side with a bunch of expats, they would always joke around and be like, "Oh, we're changing lives." Like tongue in cheek. But I mean, jokes aside, 100% we are. Like, I just think about my own career journey. And I think about the roles that I've, been fortunate enough to work in, and the interviews that I had to go through to get those roles, and then how much it changed my life when I got those jobs. My job at REA was a big one. When I moved to Slalom, another big one. And most recently, when I've gone to Mantle Group, huge impact on my life and everything around it, right? And and my mental outlook, and feeling challenged and valued. Like, we are changing people's lives, and whether or not they're aligned to your role, like, they're still a human. Like, just yes, it's volume. Yes, you need people, like a lot of people in the funnel, to get the right person out the bottom. But just don't forget that they're humans just like you, right? A phone call, a text message sometimes makes all the difference, even if it's to say you don't have an update yet. Like, 2 lines. Hey, it's Simon from Mantle. Sorry, don't have an update yet. I'll chat to you soon. Like, that's it. Takes you 2 seconds. And from my experience as a candidate, it makes so much difference. So that's probably the other piece I would add.
Yeah. And you're right. Even just like you said, taking out 2 minutes from your time and just saying, I don't have an update is an update. And people still appreciate that. They're not going to hound you and be like, I want detailed feedback. As long as you just say, I don't have anything just yet, but you'll hear from me in the next couple of days with the more, detailed feedback or whatever that is. And don't get me started on candidate experience right now in this market, because it's a shit show, as we all know. But
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast, right?
it absolutely is. Oh my god, don't get me started. Maybe we'll have another session on that. But Simon, with your role at Mantle Group, do you want to tell us what are you currently hiring, looking for? So if there are any listeners out there who might know some really good
Everything.
candidates, everything. All right, everything.
We're hiring everything. No, look, Mantle Group's in a really fortunate position, right? Where we're smack bang in growth mode, but a lot of organizations aren't right now. But we have big growth plans. We're now looking towards 2030. So, if you are working in the space of cloud, data, cybersecurity, or digital, and by digital, I'm talking app development, software engineering, design, like, we are hiring across all fronts.
Awesome.
And I should forget to mention delivery as well, right? So look, we're a consulting firm, but with a pretty major difference. If you want to learn more, jump on the website; it's all on there. But we have a pretty unique way of running an organization. We have a very contemporary and kind of new age way of just running a consulting business and how we do it, and we're doing it at scale, which is a pretty exciting journey to be a part of.
Awesome. Or just hound Simon. He'll definitely come back to you in a day or two after that. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, my LinkedIn inbox is going to blow up now. It's going to explode.
No, Simon, this has been fantastic. And I think we need more conversations like this to not just talk about AI, to talk about, how AI is going to impact our jobs here and there, but it's also about, peeling back the layers and going back to the simplistic ways of doing recruitment. And sometimes we forget that. And I think, we get so boggled down and go into rabbit holes trying to figure out all the most complex things, but sometimes the most simple things are right in front of us. So there
Yeah,
we go.
exactly.
Yeah,
You focus on what you can control, and oftentimes the rest just takes care of itself.
absolutely. Well, Simon, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on the Crafty Saucer. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and take care.